My name is Pamela, and I'm 53 years old. Tonight, I was supposed to be celebrating my son Marcus's 28th birthday at his favorite restaurant. I spent weeks planning this dinner, hoping it would bring us closer after months of growing distance. I thought I knew my son, the boy I raised alone for 25 years, the one I sacrificed everything for. But that night, on his 28th birthday, he said something that changed everything forever. Before I share what happened next, please let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about life's unexpected turns. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this story unfolds because sometimes the most shocking moments come from the people we love most. I became a single mother when Marcus was only 3 years old. His father walked out on us without explanation, leaving behind nothing but unpaid bills and broken promises. From that moment, my entire world revolved around my little boy. I had been a successful paralegal with dreams of becoming a lawyer, but those dreams took a back seat when I realized Marcus needed me more than I needed any career. For 25 years, I worked 3 jobs to give him everything I never had. Mornings were spent at a law office downtown, answering phones and filing documents. Afternoons, I tutored neighborhood kids in their homes, helping them with homework, while earning just enough to cover our groceries. Weekends meant cleaning offices until my hands were raw and my back ached, but I never complained. Every dollar went toward Marcus's future. I remember eating instant noodles for dinner so he could have proper meals. I wore the same 3 dresses to work for years while making sure Marcus had new clothes for school. When he wanted piano lessons, I took on extra weekend shifts. When he showed interest in swimming, I found the money for pool memberships and coaching. Karate debate team summer camps, whatever Marcus wanted, I found a way to make it happen. Other mothers had support systems, husbands, extended families. I had only my determination and an unshakable belief that my sacrifices would be worth it when Marcus achieved his dreams. I never dated seriously because every potential relationship felt like time stolen from my son. Men would ask me out, but I always politely declined. Marcus came first, always. The neighborhood mothers sometimes whispered about my choices, calling me overprotective or too involved. But they didn't understand what it meant to be the only person standing between your child and the world. Every scraped knee, every broken heart, every disappointment, I was there to fix it all. I was Marcus's mother, father, cheerleader, and safety net rolled into one exhausted but devoted package. My sacrifices paid off in ways that exceeded even my wildest dreams. Marcus, graduated valedictorian from high school, earned a full scholarship to Columbia University and went on to Harvard Law School. By 25, he was working at one of Manhattan's most prestigious law firms, earning more in a year than I had made in 5. I was so proud, I could barely contain myself. But success changed him in ways I hadn't anticipated. The sweet, grateful boy who used to call me every day gradually became distant and formal. Our weekly dinners turned into monthly obligations, then sporadic meetups when his schedule allowed. He moved from his modest apartment into a luxury penthouse and started wearing suits that cost more than my monthly rent. Then came Brittany. She was everything I wasn't: tall, blonde, sophisticated, and wealthy beyond imagination. Her father owned a chain of hotels, and she had never worked a day in her life. The first time Marcus brought her home, she looked around our modest apartment with barely concealed disdain, commenting that the neighborhood was charming in a rustic way. Brittany made it clear from the beginning that she considered me an impediment to their relationship. She would interrupt our conversations with urgent calls about wedding planning or social events. During family gatherings, she would monopolize Marcus's attention, whispering in his ear about how overwhelming family obligations could be. I watched my son gradually adopt her perspectives, defending her when I expressed concerns about her attitude. The worst part was watching Marcus become ashamed of his humble beginnings. He stopped mentioning our tiny apartment or the years of struggle. When colleagues asked about his family, he would deflect or give vague answers. The boy who once proudly told his teachers about his hardworking mother now seemed embarrassed by the very sacrifices that had made his success possible. I tried to give them space, hoping that distance might help Marcus remember who he really was. I stopped calling as frequently, waited for him to initiate contact, and bit my tongue when Brittany made cutting remarks about my involvement in their lives. But the space only seemed to widen the gap between us. When Marcus's 28th birthday approached, I saw it as an opportunity to rebuild our relationship. I spent 2 weeks researching restaurants, finally choosing the Golden Oak, the same upscale establishment where we had celebrated his law school graduation. It was expensive, more than I typically spent on groceries in a month, but I wanted the evening to be perfect. I saved for 3 months to buy his gift a Rolex Submariner that I had seen him admiring in a magazine. The watch cost nearly $5,000, representing almost all of my savings, but I wanted to give him something that reflected how proud I was of his accomplishments. Every extra shift, every skipped meal, every denied personal pleasure went toward that watch. I spent hours planning the guest list, coordinating with Brittany's family, and making sure every detail was perfect. I made reservations for 12 people, including his law school friends and colleagues he had mentioned wanting to impress. The restaurant required a deposit that stretched my budget to the breaking point, but I gladly paid it. The morning of his birthday, I visited the salon for the first time in months, getting my hair styled and my nails done. I wore my best dress, a navy blue number I had bought for his law school graduation, and practiced what I would say in my birthday toast. I wanted to tell him how proud I was, how worth it all the sacrifices had been, and how much I loved the man he had become. I arrived at the restaurant 30 minutes early, making sure the flowers I had ordered were properly arranged and the champagne was chilled. I reviewed the evening's timeline in my mind, imagining Marcus's surprise and joy when he opened his gift. I pictured us laughing together like we used to, sharing stories and remembering all the good times we had shared. For the first time in months, I felt genuinely hopeful about our relationship. Tonight would mark a new beginning, I told myself. Tonight, my son would remember how much I loved him, and we would find our way back to each other. I had no idea how wrong I was about to be. Marcus arrived 35 minutes late without apology or explanation. He looked handsome in his expensive suit, but his expression was cold and distant. Brittany clung to his arm, wearing a dress that probably cost more than my monthly income, her smile bright, but her eyes calculating. The other guests had already been seated and were making awkward small talk while we waited. Instead of greeting me with his usual hug, Marcus gave me a perfunctory nod and immediately checked his phone. When I tried to compliment his appearance, he responded with a distracted, "Thanks," without looking up. Brittany made a show of kissing my cheek, but her greeting felt hollow and rehearsed. I had hoped the familiar setting would bring back good memories, but Marcus seemed determined to remain detached. When I mentioned how special this restaurant was to us, he simply shrugged and said he didn't really remember our previous dinner here. His law school friends seemed uncomfortable with the tension, making polite conversation, while Marcus continued scrolling through his phone. The meal began with painful small talk. I tried to ask about his recent cases, his work colleagues, his plans for the future. Marcus answered in monosyllables, his attention divided between his phone and whispered conversations with Brittany. When I laughed at something one of his friends said, he shot me an annoyed look that made my stomach clench with anxiety. Halfway through dinner, I pulled out a photo album I had carefully prepared, filled with pictures from Marcus's childhood and teenage years. I thought it would be fun to share some funny stories with his friends to show them the sweet, determined boy who had grown into such a successful man. But as I opened the album, Brittany's voice cut through the conversation like a knife. "Oh, wonderful, more baby photos," she said with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "How quaint." Her tone was dripping with condescension, and I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. I looked to Marcus, expecting him to defend me or at least redirect the conversation, but he remained silent, his jaw tight with irritation. I tried to recover by sharing a story about Marcus's determination to learn piano despite having no natural talent. He practiced 4 hours every day, I said, hoping to salvage the moment. I remember working extra shifts just to afford those lessons, but seeing his dedication made every sacrifice worth it. The words came out more emotional than I intended, and I immediately regretted the reference to our financial struggles. Marcus finally looked directly at me, his eyes flashing with anger. "Mom, can you not make this about you?" His voice was sharp enough to cut through the restaurant's ambient noise. "Not everything is about your sacrifices." The table fell silent. His friends stared at their plates, clearly uncomfortable with the sudden tension. Brittany smiled with what looked suspiciously like satisfaction. I felt my face flush with humiliation, but I forced myself to smile and apologize, trying to laugh off the moment, as if it didn't matter. I decided to move forward with the gift presentation, hoping it might salvage the evening and show Marcus how much he meant to me. I had wrapped the Rolex box in elegant paper and tied it with a silver ribbon, imagining his surprise and gratitude when he opened it. My hands trembled slightly as I placed the package in front of him. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," I said softly, trying to inject warmth into my voice despite the chill that had settled over our table. I hope you love it as much as I loved choosing it for you. Marcus opened the package with the mechanical efficiency of someone fulfilling an obligation rather than enjoying a surprise. When he lifted the watch from its velvet box, I held my breath, waiting for the reaction I had imagined so many times. Instead, he glanced at it briefly, turned it over once, and set it back in the box. Thanks, he said flatly. It's nice, I guess. The words hit me like a physical blow. No hug, no genuine smile, no acknowledgement of what the gift represented. I had worked overtime for months to afford that watch-skipping meals and wearing my coat indoors to save on heating bills. But Marcus seemed completely unmoved by the gesture. Brittany leaned over to examine the watch, her perfectly manicured fingers picking it up as if it were a curiosity, rather than a gift of love. Darling, didn't we just buy you that Cartier last month? She asked Marcus, her voice carrying clearly across the table. The one from Tiffany's, this is different. The dismissive tone in her voice made me want to disappear under the table. I had thought the Rolex was sophisticated and impressive, but suddenly it felt cheap and inappropriate. Marcus didn't contradict Brittany or defend my choice. He simply nodded and put the watch away as if eager to move past the awkward moment. I tried one more time to connect with him, reaching for a memory that had always made him smile. I remember when you were 7. I began, my voice catching slightly. You said you wanted a watch just like Daddy's. You used to draw pictures of watches and tell me about all the adventures you would have when you were old enough to wear one. Marcus's expression hardened further. God, Mom, can you stop living in the past? He snapped, his voice loud enough that other diners turned to look at our table. Everything doesn't have to be some sentimental journey down memory lane. The hostility in his voice was unlike anything I had ever heard from him before. This wasn't the sweet boy I had raised, the young man who used to thank me for every sacrifice and tell me I was his hero. This was a stranger wearing my son's face, and I didn't know how to reach him anymore. In desperation, I made one final attempt to salvage the evening and reconnect with the son I barely recognized. The dinner was nearly over, and I knew this might be my last chance to break through the wall he had built around himself. I leaned forward slightly, trying to catch his eye with the same gentle smile that used to comfort him after bad dreams. Marcus, honey, I said softly, hoping the endearment might remind him of better times between us. You seem upset tonight, and I want to understand what's wrong. What would make this birthday perfect for you? What do you need from me to make things right between us? For a moment, hope flickered in my chest. Maybe he would finally open up about whatever had been bothering him. Maybe we could have an honest conversation about the distance that had grown between us. Maybe there was still time to repair our relationship before it was too late. Marcus set down his wine glass and looked directly at me for the first time all evening. But instead of the warmth or vulnerability I had hoped to see, his eyes were cold and calculating. He seemed to be weighing his words carefully, and something in his expression made my blood run cold. You want to know what would be the best gift? He said, his voice steady and deliberate. You disappearing from my life. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud, poisoning everything around them. The restaurant's gentle murmur faded into background static as I tried to process what my son had just said to me. Around our table, conversations died mid-sentence. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Even Brittany looked shocked by the brutality of his words. But Marcus wasn't finished. I'm tired of your constant neediness, your guilt trips, your suffocating love, he continued, his voice growing stronger with each cruel word. Brittany is right about you. You're exhausting. You make everything about yourself and your sacrifices. I wish you would just go away. The silence that followed was deafening. His law school friends stared at their plates in mortification. The couple at the next table had stopped eating entirely clearly, overhearing the devastating exchange. Even the waitstaff seemed to sense the tension hovering uncertainly at a distance. I sat frozen, my mind struggling to process the magnitude of what had just happened. This wasn't a momentary outburst or a reaction to too much wine. This was a deliberate, calculated attack designed to cause maximum damage. My son, the child I had devoted my life to raising, had just told me he wished I didn't exist. For 30 seconds, that felt like 30 years, I sat in absolute silence. The restaurant continued its normal rhythm around us, but at our table time seemed suspended. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting to see how I would react to such devastating cruelty. Some part of me expected to burst into tears, to collapse under the weight of such betrayal. But instead, something cold and calm settled over me like armor. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't beg him to take back his words or explain how much they had hurt me. Instead, I reached into my purse with steady hands and placed enough cash on the table to cover the entire bill, including a generous tip for our mortified waitress. Standing up slowly, I looked directly at Marcus for what I somehow knew would be the last time. "I understand perfectly," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Thank you for being so clear about what you want." I picked up my coat and purse, nodding politely to the other guests, who were staring at me with a mixture of pity and horror. "Happy birthday, Marcus," I said quietly. "I hope you get exactly what you wished for." Walking through that restaurant felt like crossing a bridge that was burning behind me with every step. I could feel their eyes following me, could imagine the whispered conversations that would start the moment I left. But I kept my head high and my pace steady until I reached my car in the parking lot. Only then did I allow myself to sit still and absorb what had just happened. But even alone in my car, I didn't cry. The pain was too deep for tears, too profound for any normal expression of grief. Instead, I felt something I had never experienced before, a complete emotional shutdown, as if some essential part of me had simply stopped functioning. I drove home through the dark streets in a state of numb shock. 25 years of devoted motherhood had just been dismissed as worthless neediness. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every moment of pride in his accomplishments, all of it had been reduced to suffocating love that he wanted to escape. The house felt different when I walked through the door. It no longer felt like the home where I had raised a beloved son. It felt like a museum dedicated to a relationship that had never really existed, filled with photographs and memories of a boy who had apparently resented me all along. I sat in my living room for the rest of the night, staring at the walls and trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong. For 3 days, I waited. Despite everything Marcus had said, some stubborn part of me expected him to call. I imagined he would apologize, explain that he had been drunk or stressed, promise that he hadn't meant any of it. I kept my phone nearby, checking it obsessively for messages that never came. On the 4th day, I finally understood that no apology was coming. Marcus had meant every word he said, and his silence was confirmation that he truly did want me out of his life. That realization brought a strange kind of clarity, like stepping out of a fog I hadn't realized I was lost in. If Marcus wanted me to disappear, then I would disappear completely. But I would do it on my terms, not his. I started with the legal arrangements. I called a lawyer and scheduled an emergency appointment to change my will. Marcus had been my sole beneficiary, set to inherit everything I had worked so hard to accumulate. Within a week, I had rewritten the document to leave my assets to various charities instead. Next, I visited the bank to close the joint accounts I had maintained with Marcus since his college years. There was a trust fund I had been contributing to for years, money I had intended to give him when he got married or bought his first house. I froze those accounts and transferred the funds into investments that only I could access. The college fund I had started when he was 3 years old still contained nearly $80,000, money I had planned to give him for his children's education. I withdrew every penny and donated it to a scholarship program for single mothers returning to school. It felt appropriate somehow, helping other women who were struggling to build better lives for their children. Selling the house was the hardest part emotionally, but also the most liberating. Every room held memories of Marcus growing up, his first steps in the living room, birthday parties in the kitchen, homework sessions at the dining room table. But those memories belonged to a different life, one that had apparently been built on illusions. The house sold quickly for nearly $500,000, far more than I had expected. After paying off the mortgage and various fees, I had enough money to start completely over anywhere I wanted. For the first time in 25 years, I was free to make decisions based solely on my own desires rather than my son's needs. I spent hours researching potential destinations, finally settling on San Diego. The climate was perfect, the cost of living reasonable, and most importantly, it was 3,000 miles away from Marcus and the life I was leaving behind. I bought a small condo near the ocean and arranged to have my belongings shipped ahead of me. On my last day in the house, I wrote a single letter and left it on the kitchen table where Marcus would be sure to find it. The message was simple. "You said the best gift was me disappearing. Your wish is granted." I didn't include my new address, phone number, or any way for him to contact me. If he truly wanted me gone, then I would give him exactly what he asked for. The drive to California took 4 days, and I savored every mile. I was Patricia now, Pat to my new neighbors, and Pamela felt like someone I used to know a long time ago. I had legally changed my name, updated all my identification, and created completely new email accounts and social media profiles. The transformation was remarkably easy, as if I had been waiting my whole life for permission to become someone else. My new condo was small but beautiful, with large windows overlooking the Pacific Ocean. I decorated it with new furniture and bright colors, completely different from the neutral tones and family photographs that had defined my old home. This space was mine alone, free from memories and expectations and the weight of unappreciated sacrifices. I found part-time work at a legal aid clinic, helping women navigate divorce proceedings and child custody disputes. It was fulfilling in ways my old job had never been, using my experience to help other women who were fighting for better lives. My colleagues knew nothing about my past, and I preferred it that way. The first few months were harder than I had anticipated. Despite everything Marcus had said and done, I missed him terribly. I would catch myself reaching for the phone to call him about something funny I had seen, or wondering how he was handling a difficult case at work. But I forced myself to resist those impulses, remembering his words and the coldness in his eyes that night. Gradually, the pain began to fade, replaced by something I hadn't felt in decades: peace. I joined a book club, started taking painting classes, and made friends with my neighbor Eleanor, a widow who had also reinvented herself after loss. We would sit on her balcony in the evenings, sharing wine and stories about the lives we had left behind. For the first time since Marcus was 3 years old, I was living entirely for myself. I could travel when I wanted, eat what I pleased, spend my money on things I enjoyed rather than someone else's needs. It was terrifying and exhilarating and surprisingly wonderful. About 6 months after I left, Eleanor mentioned seeing my story on a news program about adult children who cut contact with their parents. Apparently, Marcus had hired a private investigator to try to track me down, but my name change and cross-country move had made me effectively invisible. The reporter had painted him as a concerned son, desperately searching for his missing mother, but Eleanor saw through the narrative immediately. If he was really concerned, she pointed out, he wouldn't have needed a private investigator to maintain contact in the first place. Through mutual acquaintances back home, I learned fragments of Marcus's life after my disappearance. Brittany had initially been thrilled by my absence, telling friends that she finally had Marcus all to herself. But her satisfaction was short-lived. Without me as a common enemy, their relationship began to unravel under the pressure of Marcus's growing guilt and her complete lack of empathy. They divorced less than a year after his birthday dinner with Brittany, taking half his assets and moving on to someone else within weeks. Marcus found himself alone for the first time in his adult life, finally understanding what he had thrown away in pursuit of someone else's approval. His 29th birthday came and went without celebration. According to the few mutual friends who still spoke to both of us, he spent the day alone in his expensive apartment, surrounded by all the material success he had achieved, but unable to share it with the one person who had always been proudest of his accomplishments. He tried various methods to find me over the years: private investigators, social media searches, even reaching out to distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in decades. But Patricia Murphy was a completely different person from Pamela Henderson, and I had been very careful to leave no trails connecting my old life to my new one. Sometimes I wondered if I was being too harsh, if I should reach out and give him a chance to apologize. But then, I would remember his words that night, the calculated cruelty in his voice, and I would know that some bridges once burned can never be rebuilt. He had made his choice, and I had made mine. 5 years have passed since that terrible birthday dinner, and I can honestly say I have no regrets about my decision. The woman I have become bears little resemblance to the exhausted, self-sacrificing mother I used to be. Patricia is confident, independent, and genuinely happy in ways that Pamela never was. I've traveled to places I always dreamed of seeing, but never could afford when every dollar went toward Marcus's future. I've developed hobbies and friendships based on shared interests rather than parental obligations. I've even started dating again, something I never thought possible after decades of putting my son's needs before my own romantic happiness. My work at the legal aid clinic has expanded into advocacy and volunteer coordination. I help other women who are struggling to escape difficult family situations or rebuild their lives after devastating betrayals. Many of them are mothers whose children have turned against them, and I can offer them something precious proof that it's possible to survive and even thrive after losing the most important relationship in your life. Marcus is now 33 years old, and from what I hear through the grapevine, he has never stopped looking for me. He apparently keeps a private investigator on retainer, hoping that someday I'll slip up and reveal my location. But I've built my new life too carefully for that to happen accidentally. Sometimes I imagine what would happen if he found me. Would he apologize? Would he finally understand the magnitude of what he threw away? Would he expect me to welcome him back with open arms, to forgive and forget as if nothing had happened? The fantasy is tempting, but I know better than to indulge it too deeply. The truth is that Marcus made his feelings perfectly clear that night. He told me exactly what he thought of my love, my sacrifices, and my place in his life. I gave him precisely what he asked for, and I refused to feel guilty about honoring his wishes. Some gifts once given cannot be taken back. I am not angry anymore. Anger requires more emotional investment than Marcus deserves from me now. I am simply free. Free from the weight of unappreciated devotion, free from the pain of watching my love be treated as a burden, free from the exhausting work of trying to maintain a relationship with someone who fundamentally didn't want me in his life. They say a mother's love is unconditional, but even the deepest well can run dry when it's never replenished by gratitude or respect. I spent 25 years pouring everything I had into raising Marcus, believing that love and sacrifice would be enough to build an unbreakable bond between us. I learned too late that love, no matter how deep or devoted, cannot survive being actively rejected by the person you're trying to love. The question I want to leave you with today is this: when someone shows you exactly who they are and what they think of your love, do you believe them? And if the people closest to you suddenly disappeared tomorrow, would they leave knowing how much you appreciated their presence in your life? Because sometimes the most valuable gift we can give ourselves is the courage to walk away from relationships that diminish rather than celebrate who we are. If this story resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to make the difficult decision to cut ties with someone you loved? How do you know when it's time to stop fighting for a relationship that isn't being reciprocated? I read every comment and appreciate you taking the time to share your experiences with our community. Don't forget to like this video if it touched your heart. Subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories about love loss and finding the strength to rebuild, and share this with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to choose your own peace over someone else's approval. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is give someone exactly what they ask for, even when it breaks your heart to do it. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video.